Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Service departments, what's the opportunity? And first of all, I'd like to just, before I introduce the panelists, just like to kick off with a quick question. Who in the audience is actively involved in the service department extended stay sector? Okay. And I guess the rest of you are just inquiring, inquisitive, curious, and trying to find out what's going on. Okay, so we've kind of half and half, which is a great mix. So what I'd like to do is introduce the panelists. We have some great panelists up here on the stage this morning. We have Guus Bakker, he's the CEO of Frasers Hospitality for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. We have Jo Layton, she is the MD of the Apartment Service. We have Christabelle Morgan, she's the Development Director for Adagio globally. And we have Vedrana for Ciel Capital, the investment side of the business. So we have a great panel. We're going to take you on a bit of a journey, and we thought the way that we would structure this is we're going to start with, what the demand is, because one of the big questions is there demand and what does it look like? So we're going to start from that side. We're going to then look at the kind of locations that work and which ones are evolving, and then we're going to move into product and what kind of product attributes are working, what trends are we seeing, and then we're going to look at the profitability piece of the equation. So that's the journey. We want to make it as interactive as possible. There are question sheets on your seats at the end of each row. There's 3 or 4 at the end of each row. So if you'd like to ask a question, just kind of fill in one of those, and if you could pass it to Alex from EMEA, he's standing up at the back there, he can deliver it to the stage. And otherwise, just feel free to stand up and shout at us, and we'll try and answer best we can. For those of you that don't know me, Jonathan Humphries from HoCoSo, we specialize on creating concepts in this space. Okay, so first up, we're going to start with demand. What does it look like? We're going to try and frame this more as a discussion, because we felt like kind of all sitting in a row here. It kind of makes it a little bit formal, and maybe it just opens it up a little bit more to you as well out there. So first up, we're going to start with corporate and leisure demand, and I'm going to open this up to Guus and Jo. And so kind of what trends are you seeing on the demand side, corporate? Where is it coming from? Kind of how is it evolving? Where is it going to? And on the leisure side, what are we seeing there? Is there an opportunity?
Absolutely.
So I'll let you guys start.
Okay,
Jo?
ladies first. So I work for the Apartment Service, which is a global agency, and we've got 7 offices across the globe. The key area that I can discuss with you today is the demand for corporates, large corporates that want global programs. So at the moment, what you have is quite a disparate group of buyers buying individually and buying into certain markets. What I do is I put all of that demand together into one arena, build a corporate global program, and then mandate it, which is probably the best news for the room. If you're thinking of investing into service departments, most of the global programs that are being developed now are actually pushing anything over 5 nights into a service department. So, and we help them to do that. So the Apartment Service helps to develop the program for the buyer.
Okay. And Jo, where are those companies coming from, and kind of what size companies are they? How many employees? That kind of thing.
I think our largest client is about 100 million currently, which we've just signed in the last couple of weeks. And that's spend over 7 nights. That's just one company. We've rolled out a company in the last 2 weeks that is about a £40 million spend. And we can deal with anything from £40,000 up to 100 million. The locations are global. Everyone's moving around the world. Secondary locations are as important to us as primary locations. But the demand has increased. And I think the interesting thing from our perspective is that we are pushing people maybe out of the maybe more budget hotels into service departments for the value that they're going to receive in the programs.
Great. I think we'll come back to that a little bit later in terms of the competitive aspect there. Guus, what are you seeing from the leisure side of things?
Demand is unlimited. There's no reason why I don't think there's anybody in this room who would pay the same as a hotel room and get 50% more space. I think nobody is opposed to that. So the demand is growing. We are seeing a big shift towards the leisure over the past 5 years, but it started already in the early 2000s. Because with the concept being known better, people are just using it for their private travel, and that is we are seeing some of our properties that are having 70-75% leisure occupancy versus 90% of corporate in the past. So that is it is all good news. Is that everybody is using service departments and more.
Is that, do you think that's partly driven by channels like Airbnb just creating awareness and kind of getting people comfortable with the product as well, that they kind of would choose a hotel or apartment for their kind of leisure stay?
I think I would be proud to say that we were there before Airbnb, so it's don't get me into an area where I don't want to go. Well, as I just said, we saw this trend starting in already 15 years. Personally, I'm coming from a so-called French background. I started my career in France, where the concept was, of course, with the brands like Citadines and Pierre Vacances in the cities, and Adagio is the result of that. So it has always been there. It is. I would always. People were saying, "Oh, this is only from the last decade." I'm saying I'm closer to retirement than to the start of a career, and I've always been in service departments. So.
Okay, so this trend has always been there. It's just becoming more known outside of the, I guess, core group into the wider industry. So just for those of you that just joined, we're going to take you on a journey. We're going to start with demand. We're going to look at, we're just talking about corporate leisure demand. Then we're moving on to distribution channels, kind of how they work, where they come from. Then product development, product attributes, kind of what we're seeing there, because obviously a lot of it's demand driven. And then moving on to looking at branded versus non-branded products. And then we're looking at profitability metrics. I just mentioned that there are questions that you can, pieces of paper at the end of the row that you can fill in for questions. So if there's any questions, please feel free to give them to Alex, who's standing at the back of the room, or otherwise just kind of raise your hand. We'll take questions as we go along. Okay, so on staying kind of connected with the demand side, we have, I guess we want to share with the audience kind of, distribution channels, the differences between extended stay and hotels, what we're seeing there and what the opportunity is in terms of things like costs of acquisition and overall costs. Christabelle, what are your kind of perspective on that?
In terms of distribution, really, we being a brand of the HoCoSo portfolio, we really use, the backbone and all the distribution system of Accor. So it's definitely for our specific product, which is really Aparthotel, and getting back to demand 50% leisure, 50% corporate. We really use the same channels. Again, we have some specificity, and I think Joe can address the relocation agency, which are, source of demand that the classical hotel business doesn't have. But apart from that, our model is also, short stays, medium stays, and long stays. So it's a good balance between classical hotel distribution and specific hotel distribution. So after the distribution costs, they remain the same as for hotels. A good thing is that for very long stays, OLTAs are not able, technically speaking, to book, long stays. So we have, if you compare, the P&L of a Aparthotel and a classical hotel, the percentage of commissions, distribution commission is much lower because of that reason. So again, and if you want me to go to operating cost, I don't know if it's too early, but anyway, of course, the operating cost is much lower, in terms of check-in, check-out, housekeeping, and all that. So, but I guess we come back to that in the profit. But distribution, I would say, just to sum up, using the same system as for hotels, And in addition, using relocation agency and specific, agencies for the long stay part.
And I guess also there's benefit because of the longer stay. You've got essentially one check-in, one check-out. So reservation costs are obviously,
So
much
when
more
we get to the return on investment, I can make hours on that and give you a ton of figures on the way housekeeping, and of course the staff. Staffing is of course a major element in the P&L of a hotel, and for an apart hotel, this is really the main point that we can dramatically reduce. And if you see the average of staff members, so check-in, check-out, reception, but also housekeeping and of course F&B, because no restaurants, no bars, so reduce amount of staff, then increase EBITDA. But anyway, we'll come back to that, I guess.
Okay. Any questions on demand piece so far, distribution channels, before we move on to locations? Okay. So we'd like to kind of talk about locations, and I'll start with Joe and then move on to Vedrana. So primary and secondary locations, kind of, what are you seeing in terms of trends? Because you're seeing all the demand coming in through all your channels, and they're obviously requesting certain kinds of destinations in the market and locations. And I guess from a development investment perspective, this is quite kind of helpful to know kind of where the opportunities may be, because obviously you hear a lot about certain product wanting to be in key gateway cities all the time, all competing for the same kind of location. So maybe there's an opportunity here to kind of diversify a bit. So what are you seeing from that side of things, Joe, and then moving on to Vedrana as well, or both of you together?
Should I just pick that one up?
Absolutely.
From an agency perspective, it's quite interesting because the demand falls in line with obviously where the locations are, and our demand is huge for the key locations, obviously London, New York, Paris, Munich, all of the key areas that everyone has already potentially, I'm not going to say saturated because we love having choices, and we do have higher demand coming into those areas. But because we work in relocation and because we work in projects and we work in global mobility, the people that are the first travellers are not always the business travellers. Sometimes it is the project teams that go out first and start to build up a market from zero up to a high demand market. So a lot of the secondary cities can become a very good place for large buyers to put their flag in, and then the accommodation follows. So if I was looking to develop an apart hotel somewhere, I'd literally look at all of the business parks, and I would basically put a flag in each of those business parks, very similar to what Quest has done over in Australia, because you will get the short-term demand of people wanting more space and some flexibility, but you'll also get the longer-term projects with the assignees that do arrive and stay for 2, 3, 4, up to 6 months, sometimes up to a year, depending on how big the project is. So if you look at, say, for instance, the HS2 project into Birmingham and some other moves of large corporates into Birmingham, Birmingham will go through the roof in the next 2 years or so. So there are a lot of areas that maybe don't seem like prime locations initially, but will turn out to be highly competitive locations in the future.
Great, thanks, Joe. Vedrana, what are you seeing on the investment side?
That. So when it comes to what we look for, it's actually a mix of leisure and corporate demand locations. But the nice thing with apart hotels is that you don't necessarily need to be on the main street. So long you are actually well located, close to transport hubs, it actually still works. And we do a lot actually in the UK. We're not very, very active in Europe at the moment. We are going to be looking at Germany a little bit later this year. But in the UK, certainly, I would completely agree that locations such as Birmingham and Manchester are certainly on our radar. I mean, we own a building in Birmingham that we've just had planning for. And we'll obviously have an apart hotel. But yeah, from our perspective, good city center locations that are not necessarily on the main road work really, really nicely. And it's funny because we were talking about obviously demand drivers earlier on, and I said what's nice with apart hotels is really the flexibility in the product. Because talking about the leisure market, for instance, if you have a young family with 2 children, for example, if you were staying in a traditional hotel, you would need 2 bedrooms. Whereas the apart hotel gives you the flexibility of not only feeding them in the morning and in the evening, which is a challenge for the ones who are parents sometimes, and obviously having cooking facilities when you're traveling as a business traveler and spending a little bit more time in a city and not having to dine out every single day is actually very convenient. So I think it's really the flexibility.
So that, I guess, moves smoothly into, the product side, right? I mean, if you're going into these kind of locations which don't have kind of everything on your doorstep, then I guess you're going to need to think about developing product which has all the supporting facilities with it. Is that a fair statement, Christabelle?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, like Vedrana was saying, location is still, very important because, whether for short stays or long stays, but even more for long stays, you need to have good transport and, supermarket, restaurant, shops and all that. But whether as a standalone Aparthotel or what we call combo, which is combination of Aparthotel brand and a hotel, the whole idea is to, in a way, use the facilities of the surroundings. So we almost all know in the room that, the higher, margin that we can get is on room accommodation. So just to be a little bit, tough on that, let's keep, the F&B offers, outside of our P&L, and we're pretty happy. So restaurant, bars, supermarkets and things outside. And after we just, need to have a product which, answers, the request, like you were saying. We, within Adagio, I guess Guus is a little bit different, but we only have studios and one-bedroom apartments. We tend to do at minimum 10% connecting, so if we need to provide two-bedroom apartments, we can, but definitely it's not, the main product we offer. And of course, limited services, limited space, with only breakfast room, 24/7 reception. So in terms of offering, this is a limited service hotel. I guess you have 2 bedrooms in your typical rooms, or you
it depends on the location. In Europe, we are reducing the size of the units from the 2 beds and 3 beds to the 1 beds and studios. In different parts in the Middle East, for example, there's still a strong demand for 2-bedroom apartments, and so we are very flexible in our approaches, and the evaluation of a site is, and the brand that we will put in a certain location will very much depend on that study of the location. So the range will go from 3 to 5-star, and getting very close to some of the hotels in some locations. When we go with the Capri brand, for example, is we are adding an F&B offering. Because it will be in a location where there is demand for some F&B offering as well.
And I think that's really key, because the one thing to remember is when it comes to service apartments or Aparthotels or corporate housing, F&B is not necessarily something, and we will be talking obviously about ancillary services later on, but from our perspective, there's no point doing F&B if there's no need for food and beverage when it comes to an Aparthotel. And we work in partnership with a lot of providers. So for instance, on our Wotu asset, we have 2 fantastic sommeliers who are going to be operating the F&B for us, completely separate to the hotel services. And it's like a turnover rent style arrangement. And I think that flexibility, because I completely agree with Christabelle, that unfortunately F&B is definitely not the strongest point in a hotel's P&L. And so being able to be flexible around that. And there are certainly some locations where actually you have a lot of food and beverage already, where it doesn't necessarily make sense to have food and beverage and just monetize that space doing more F&B. Sorry, Worms.
Yeah, from my perspective as an agent, it's very rare that anyone asks if there's food and beverage on site. What we mainly have to do is define and refine the customer to the product. So not every customer is the right customer to enter in a certain product. When you're dealing with families, they don't particularly need food and beverage because there is a family environment and they are going to shop. And if you're dealing with an individual assignee that's coming and is going to be working in their office until 10 o'clock at night and literally just come home and grab something on the way home, another completely different product is required for those. And it's interesting that the right product needs to be built in the right places for the right customers. And that's how you will end up with the perfect environment for an extended stay. And by that I mean the secondary locations that may be not primary for business, i.e. say for instance Richmond or Kew, and areas that are slightly more secondary or even tertiary locations like Epsom and Guildford. You have more families that choose to stay there because of the schools. So if you do have people on assignments and people that are long stays and you're aiming for an average length of stay over 30 nights, then a 2-bedroom apartment's probably a good route to go down. If you're going for city centre and if you're going for somebody that's attached to a huge major financial company, then a studio is a very good option, and an apart hotel is fantastic.
Okay. So I guess just going in a bit more into facilities, one of the questions I always face from new investors is, do we really need to have a kitchen in the rooms, right? And it's a regular question. I mean, it seems an obvious one, but what's your response to that, Guus? Do you have a response to that? I know what Joe's response would be.
She's already responded. So
Okay.
I think it is. If you take the kitchen out, then you might as well say I'm building big hotel rooms. So it is. Yes, it is a requirement. I think today there is enough offering in that market. You don't have to have a full-fledged kitchen that is where you can sit in and dine. You can buy kitchens today that are 160, 180, and they are very functional and not that expensive, and fantastic design. So I would say a service department without kitchen is a no-go.
It's a hotel.
But maybe there are other solutions or half solutions. I mean, what about co-cooking, things like that? Are you seeing any kind of product development on that side, Christabelle? Or?
No, and again, just saying that, coming from classical hotel world, I was also expecting, a lot of costs in terms of maintenance, energy, or even construction. And again, this is really marginal, in the P&L in terms of maintenance and energy. This is the same, figures as for a classical hotel in terms of construction. It's really a tiny part of the FF&E requested, for each key. So again, this is part of the product. So without a kitchen, it's anyway we're talking hotels. So it's if investor thinks that you're seeing, I think it's really a false idea, and figures show it very quickly.
What about sharing kitchens? Can you?
Yeah, of course, we can think about, because we are making, of course, polls, and we're asking our guests, the use that they make of the kitchen, of the laundry room. For example, we don't have, washing. How do you say washing machine? Yep. For the so we don't have that in our unit. We have communal laundry, I would say, and it's enough for the guests. They really don't need it, inside each key. And for the kitchen, it's the same. So it's true that, according to the location, 10 or 20% of the guests do not use the kitchen, but you need to have it. So we try to address, this specific kind of guest. And for example, we are developing a new kind of rooms, which are bigger apartments. So we tend to address the co-living, market, with this kind of products. So we offer, for example, it's not a new product. It's really a new kind of rooms. So bigger apartment with a communal kitchen, and 4 to 6 rooms around. So we use the end of the corridors to optimize, the square meters in the space. So we'll see for larger groups of 6 people, 8 people, whether families traveling or, corporate, groups, engineers, traveling together. So we offer, only one living space, including kitchen, living area, and the rooms around. So we're going to test that and see if there's a way around the kitchen. But again, this is part of our product. So
they have private bathrooms as well.
Yeah, you have classical rooms.
Yeah.
So you have really classical rooms, and it's the apartment which is the key, I would say, that you sell. You don't sell, one room and after people that don't know each other share. It's really a group sharing, So you sell one key,
Okay,
it's a whole
so it's another segment from individuals or families.
Exactly. We're addressing
groups.
this kind of groups already within Adagio, in specific location. We have groups of, for example, Indian engineers, for example, in Munich. They really like to be together, to cook together, and so for the moment they're cooking in the apartments, and they just meet in the public areas. So, and we'll try and we'll see.
Great. Okay. I guess I just another question, I guess going back to, there seems to be a shift from what I'm hearing of kind of smaller units, studios, kind of what is driving that? Is that demand? And I'm going to ask us, is it really the fact that it's about kind of trying to get the development opportunity as well because of the commercial aspect of it?
Of course, there's various reasons. In the countries, those who are investors all know how yields have compressed over the last few years, and then we have to find those margins, or to keep the margins to keep our valuations at the same level. So it is, yes, space is expensive, and we have to reduce that, but we want to compensate that with smart design and leave out some of the facilities that we would keep a lot of space for in the past. I mean, our gyms, or eventually if there's a pool, we will make it all a bit smaller. Lobbies will become smaller, so we have to look at that, the space planning. But at the same time, there is more demand for shorter stays and for individuals, what we see, and of course in the leisure market. So we want to compensate also. I think Christabelle has got the same. Is Adagio is where we try to create units that can be split or combined, so you can still give those bigger units, but the demand is most of the time for the smaller units.
And actually, we even develop, in our studios, most part of our studio have what we call the Murphy bed. So it's in 25 square meters, room, which is a classical mid-scale size kind of room. We have, so the bed which just pull up, to the wall. So again, it's, of course, space is costly. So we manage to offer really living space, you can say 1 week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks, very comfortably, 25, square meters. So, and we have to address the issue of the space and the reduction in the price of square meters.
Well, our units in Stowaway are in Waterloo actually at 21 square meters. And so it's actually a very long room, but I think the efficiency of the design is actually key.
Yeah.
And so long you can squeeze in everything while still having that impression that you are actually in a larger room with all the amenities you need, actually it works. But going back to the size, actually that's really driven by locations. So if you're doing something in central London, obviously your site costs are going to be a lot higher than if you are perhaps in some of the other regional cities. And you are competing with hotels. So at the end of the day, you do need to try and maximize that space you have, and therefore, obviously, your EBITDA and your end value at the end of the day, because you still need to hit the margins.
Sure, Jen.
Just from a corporate buyer perspective as well, the same as everyone's trying to increase their EBITDA, there's also the corporate buyers are trying to reduce how much they spend. So if they can move from a one-bedroom apartment into a studio apartment and it still have a reasonable sized kitchen, please build extended stay products with kitchens. As long as it has a kitchen, it falls into the accommodation with a kitchen global programme. And then actually it's very rare that anyone asks for the size of the apartment. Most people are just very happy to make a saving versus if they were buying a one bed, or a saving versus if they were staying in a hotel. And the on-spend that we are able to discuss with the global buyers is that you don't have to use the food and beverage of the hotel, and it's not as convenient for a room service to come up. So the difference between a studio and getting yourself a what I call a putt-putt meal from Marks and Spencer's or something on the way home is £5, £6, £7 versus buying a room service dinner in the evening. So I think there's even if you're not going to use very much of the kitchen, you're just going to use the microwave and the plates, then that's absolutely fine, because you can, even if you can't fit in a dishwasher, just make sure you've given somebody the opportunity to heat a meal.
And just to add to what Joe was saying, actually, what we find is during the week, obviously, it's a lot of single occupancy. Yep. So at the end of the day, you actually don't need the extra space. Yep. And in the same way, hotel bedrooms or traditional hotel bedrooms have kind of shrunk over the years. Yeah. I think we're certainly seeing the same thing in the Aparthotel sector. And yeah, as I said, efficiency of design is really what counts at the end of the day, because no one really cares whether the unit is 20 or 25 or 30 square meters.
It's the ability to self-cater and make the on-spend saving that's as important as the space to a lot of buyers. We're not talking about the CEO travellers, and they're the ones that Guus would deal with maybe, but we're talking about the major projects and assignees that are travelling and basically are quite happy to all squash on a sofa. And it is quite interesting because they're a very social world inside service departments, and I think the Staybridge brand shows that from having a downstairs area that does encourage people to come down and socialise.
So I guess moving on, is that how important, if you're taking it out of the rooms, how important is it that you're putting it somewhere else? You're putting some kind of space somewhere else for creating socialization.
I'm staying locally in a design hotel, Arabelle actually, and I've not seen any area apart from a very small reception. And actually, I wouldn't go to any other area. I'm going to be in my apartment doing my calls and working, and then I'm going to go to my appointments, and I'll go to a coffee shop if I want to get a coffee. So I'm very happy as a traveller, as a female traveller, to use an apart hotel that doesn't have any F&B, so long as the product is good.
Okay, so Guus, we don't need any social space
We do want, no, of course we do want to create some space, and that is where you have to be smart in your design. And working in the hotel industry, for example, what we did in Malmaison is for the lobby to go straight into the bar, and so you're not going to say, I want to keep 200 square meters of lobby, and then afterwards there's a bar. And that is, we try to do the same in the service departments, is to create that living space, but is to use the space smartly. But in the past, we would say, well, there's a minimum, and still in some parts of the world, the expectations of lobbies and gyms and pools is higher. But I think today's guest understands that there are limitations in the offering. And well, of course, the people, they will network together. They don't always want to sit in a specific area.
Okay, so we're going on a journey. There's a few new people. There's a few new people that have joined us. So we started off with kind of highlighting the overall sector. We started with demand. We've looked at distribution channels. We've looked at product. We've got a couple of things more that we'd like to share with you. But are there any questions from the audience about any of the topics we've discussed so far? We want to try and make it as interactive. I'm sure. Wonderful. Would you mind just stating your name and your question so we can, and who you would like to answer the question? If not, I can just ask on your behalf.
I would like to have the panel's view on combining the two standard hotel with a service department.
Okay.
Does that work, or I don't think I've heard any.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a good question. So the question is there an opportunity to combine long stay solutions with short stay solutions, like dual brands, dual products, this kind of thing?
Having the two outflows,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Okay.
I think definitely that's a major trend. You know, we having, for example, in Europe, I would say that more than 50% of the project I'm working on are combined, what we call combos again. So it's combining an Adagio with another brand. Normally they are Accor brands, but you know, I can also combine, define the way, depending on the contract. If it's a lease, it's different than for management or even a franchise agreement, of course. But of course, combining the brands is definitely an asset. First in terms of investment. So, of course, you are able, according to the brands you're mixing, you can merge, the back of the house. So you save, the first square meters there. And even, in terms of front of the house, if, for example, I signed a project in Leicester in the UK, so it's a combo between a Novotel and an Adagio. And for example, even if we have two entrances for both properties, we have decided to merge the breakfast area. There's no need to have one breakfast area for Adagio and one breakfast area for the Novotel. So you have the two entrances, and actually we maintain breakfast area for the Novotel and Adagio guests, and a grab-and-go concept on the Adagio side. So you have both guests that have two different kind of offers. So here again, you can really save money in terms of square meters and FF&E installation and all that. And after, in terms of operation, on the P&L, it's reduced number of staff. You can only have one GM. Of course, the front office, staff is also mutualized. So anyway, investment and operation, it's savings, addressing different markets, different guests also, giving services to the extended stay, guests that can find, the swimming pool, the restaurant, the bar, the spa. In the Middle East, for example, we or even merging, combining up to 4 brands. In Fujairah, for example, in the Middle East, we have 4 brands. I'm working on a project here in Germany, 3 brands: Ibis Budget, Ibis Red, and Adagio Access, which is the economy brand of Adagio. Definitely, combos are a major trend, you know, and have a lot of positive impacts on
Vedrana, from an
certainly,
investment
and from
perspective.
an investment perspective, no, completely. It just works beautifully because your apart hotel per key tends to be a little bit more cost effective, especially if you're doing a full service hotel attached to it. And obviously your gross to net on the apart hotel side is very, very strong, but you can piggyback off the hotel services. And talking about the F&B in particular, it's actually really nice for the hotel as well. And even if the brands are completely separate, which we have in our Birmingham project, it's actually really good because the hotel does benefit from the apart hotel guests actually from time to time also using the hotel amenities and obviously spending money there. So we certainly couldn't agree more. We think the dual brand, even if whether it's within the same family or 2 separate brands, works really, really nicely. So in Birmingham, for instance, we have Dream obviously on the full service hotel side, and we have obviously the Stowaway on the apart hotel side. Completely separate operations, completely separate entrances, but the apart hotel certainly benefits from the hotel and vice versa.
Okay,
So
great.
absolutely agreed.
Okay, great. I think we have some more questions.
Yeah,
Mark?
just a follow on question. Doesn't that confuse the consumer? So meaning, you know, you have a restaurant, you have a sort of big lobby space. Do they realize that they're actually now in a hotel facility? And when they go to next time to another location where there is no co-located hotel, they would have a similar expectation and not find it?
It's anyway, the brands are becoming really very flexible. And again, when you are in terms of interior design, if you have your Adagio guests, again, you know, getting back to the Leicester product, for example, or even the Mannheim wine, you know, they have their own entrance. So there is the identity of the brand. And again, you know, during your check-in, and you see more and more, you know, in the hotel anyway, front office, check-in, check-out position, you know, the remote check-in, check-out. So you have someone coming up to you and doing your check-in on a tablet, and you don't even do the checkout on a tablet. So again, of course, we've been going through those analyses. Or if you have someone doing the check-in, check-out, should he wear, you know, a Novotel uniform, so an Adagio uniform? Is it going to be confusing in a way? But after, you know, we decided to make on the common public areas an interior design and an identity that can be a little bit a blend, you know, of both. But getting into, you know, the floors and the apartment after you have the identity of each product. So again, you know, merging the functions is also what we do for the standalone. So reception, you know, breakfast, lounge, Ciel, Coworking, everything is merged. So keeping the identity of each brand is indeed an issue, and it's an interior design issue, and it's a communication and image issue. But I think this is a major trend in that we have blends.
Absolutely, and
you
to
know.
add to what you were saying earlier, it's really at the end of the day, and what Joe was saying earlier, it's really at the end of the day what's inside the room. So if you want to stay in an apart hotel unit, you do need a kitchen, and I think that's really what makes quite a big difference.
I think also, just to your point, I think it's a very, very good point. So from an agency perspective, when I'm selling service departments globally or extended stay, apart hotels, corporate housing, we have to set the expectation for the traveller as the either the aggregator or the agent or the OTA. So it's our responsibility to ensure that the travellers are engaged and actually understand what they're buying before they arrive. I think from a hotelier's perspective, it's the pricing model, ensuring that you don't end up pricing your service departments the same as a suite in a hotel because you've got more space. So some owners are going to look at that and think, if I'm giving triple the size, I'd actually like triple the price. So from our perspective, from a buying perspective, is that you're probably going to bring in more families, maybe more leisure, but corporate buyers won't move up into your service department category if they're not priced at least the same as your hotel rooms. So how you actually set up your sales group to sell that is actually quite important as well. And so which brand do you use? So the brands that are here are very clear with what they're doing from the hotel perspective and from a service department perspective, but you do have to have that definition, because when the salesperson's selling, if they're selling an apartment more expensive than a hotel, it won't go down. In the corporate world, it could potentially move quite well in a leisure environment.
Guus, what about Mal and Frasers? You see some opportunities there?
So to answer, we talk about sharing economy. And today in most hotel groups, the number of F&B outlets or outlets in general that are run by separate companies is huge, and you may find that the LA Cafe actually is run by Elior. So I think, first of all, it is accepted in the market, but with the sharing economy, is people are willing to share those brands. I mean, you have these food markets in big shopping malls where everybody's eating in the same area, but from the different brands that are around the space. But we are indeed, since we took over Mao, we are looking at combinations of service departments and full service hotels, of course, yes.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, looking at anything about integrating co-working spaces, like
Mhm.
look at Zoku in the Netherlands, there's a large co-working space, and look at WeWork, they also offer WeLive, and how about what's the effect on that for the
Okay.
concept?
Okay, so what kind of what trends are you seeing? I mean, I guess first of all, is co-working space kind of something you look at seriously incorporating within new product development?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
maybe in the asset side, do you look
Yeah.
for something that kind of
I
ticks
think
that
it really
box?
depends on the size of the asset, to be perfectly honest with you, because you're always constrained by space. But where you do have the space, actually, it's certainly a trend at the moment to try and add in co-working space. So I'm working on something in the Docklands, where actually we have included 2 floors of offices, stroke co-working space within the product. And we feel that marries up quite nicely, actually, especially with the Aparthotel side, because then ultimately, ideally, in an ideal world, you do end up with people working there and staying there. And WeWork, in fact, have started that trend, but in reverse in the States, where obviously they started more, obviously, on the office side, and now they have their PRS kind of Aparthotel model and co-living as well as co-working. And yeah, we find that the two work well together, but
Yeah, and actually
Christabelle?
it's even more, important for us because for classical hotels it's a little less the case, but for Adagio, actually the public areas that, of course, it's limited space, but still here. So we need about, according to the size, the number of rooms that you have, number of keys that you have, I don't know, between 200 and 300 square meters. But apart from, between 7 and 9 in the morning when breakfast is served, the rest of the day you could see that you have empty space. So the whole idea is really to take advantage of this space and, potentially create. And again, we had discussion already, even if it's not creating, a huge amount of revenue with co-working, it's just creating, the atmosphere, is creating, the communication, potential communication. So we all use, the Costas and Pret and whatever coffees to do our calls, to get our emails and all that. So let's think about all those empty hotel lobbies where you could, easily go and grab a coffee, get your emails with a good Wi-Fi. So definitely hotel lobbies, and in addition, even more Aparthotel lobbies are really a great space to
So
develop
you've
co-working.
basically got a catchment market for this kind of opportunity.
I
Yeah.
think the other thing as well to consider is that when you're building a extended stay product, you're always going to put somewhere where people can work from home, hopefully, because if you're providing food, you should be providing a table for them to sit at, which is the definition of the difference between a hotel room and having your food on your lap, and a hotel and a service department where basically you hopefully have your food on a table in front of you. And if you look at that from my perspective, when I'm looking at, say, for instance, the co-working spaces, most of the co-working spaces are individuals sitting at a table with earphones in and basically just on their laptops. But that's actually what a service department is. It's a table that you're actually paying for the accommodation. You don't need to pay for the desk downstairs as well, because you're already sitting at your own private table in your own private space where basically your data and your information that you're looking at on your desk is private to you. And I have used WeWork in New York, and I had to close down my office due to the fact that it was all glass walls, and the information on my screens or on my team screens for large corporates was being able to be seen by people walking around inside the environment. So as GDPR actually steps up and comes up as a very high agenda point, if you have got corporate workers that are sitting in coffee shops, you need to be very aware of what the person sitting next door can see on the screen. So from my perspective, WeWork is an amazing opportunity for young startups, but for major corporate buyers, they want their people sitting inside an apartment, sitting at a desk, or at a table where they can access electricity and excellent Wi-Fi, and a cup of coffee doesn't cost them anything because it comes out of the coffee maker that's hopefully inside the apartment as well. So I think from my perspective to do you want rework as well as, or working spaces as well as apartments, you've actually already got that in a service department anyway.
Okay, so individualized hotspots for the units are pretty helpful, right? I would say.
Absolutely. Yep.
Any more questions? Whoa, great. Okay.
Given the kitchenette in the apart room is actually a key selling point, what facilities are people actually looking for? Does a microwave and a fridge count, or are people looking for a proper cooking facility? How does that vary between the different people staying long stay, people staying 2 weeks?
Okay, so
We've
the
had that debate.
Oh, okay.
Actually. And the biggest debate we've ever had was actually around the dishwasher. Because do people really use the dishwasher? And the reality is actually they don't. It's the cleaners who use the dishwashers in the individual rooms. And well, that's at least what we've found. But yes, certainly sink, a hob, microwave combi oven. Yeah, you don't need a lot. A fridge. It doesn't have to be a big fridge, but it needs to be a little bit larger than your traditional hotel fridge. So i.e. to be able to put a full-size bottle of something.
Guus.
You have to be very careful in which country you're operating, because there are, if you're going to go to Dubai, for example, Dubai is very well organized in terms of service departments. And if you are a deluxe service departments, they will say, well, you have to have this and this and this and this piece of equipment. And it's very precise. In Germany, actually, with the HoGa, it is also quite precise. So you can't just say, I'm going to leave it in or out. You have to look at your star rating that you're looking for and make sure that you are complying with those, because you can have some bad surprises from time to time.
Okay.
And looking at your customer is the most important thing. Who do you want to attract to stay in your units? Are they people that are going to be social and want to cook big, large quantities of food for their social environment that they're going to create when everyone comes home from work? Or are they somebody that's an individual that's going to come home and use the microwave to heat up a meal at 10 o'clock at night? So from my perspective, so long as you have all of those areas, the microwave that can cook as an oven as well, at least two hobs. I don't need a dishwasher if I'm on my own, but I would like one if I've got the choice, and I don't mind actually going down and be sociable and using a washing area that's in a laundry room. And most American travellers don't expect to have a washing machine in their apartment anyway, so it's quite interesting. But it depends where your source market is of business as to what your product is going to look like.
Okay. I mean, I guess we've got to balance that. If you start taking stuff out of the room, you've got to then compensate operationally about the complexity of the operations, right? So there's a kind of trade-off here in terms of operating costs. We had quite a few questions, so can I start with this? Just gentleman at the front. Yes.
Jennings from Baker & McKenzie. I'm only a lawyer, but in the concept, are there also combination concepts between service apartments and branded residences, meaning that third parties, individual owners would buy it and then have a kind of combined use of the residences, or is this just a totally different class?
It's a different product, because it's these branded residences. You have Four Seasons, you have St. Regis, you have, I think Armani is doing something. So, I mean, I don't know Raffles and Fairmont is that never heard of. No, but it does exist, but it is mainly a real estate product than a service product, and it is the services. What you see is that those services actually are used very little. They will not use the hotel services or concierge services from the hotel. It is mainly from a development point of view.
Other questions, please? This gentleman here in blue.
Why should the high-end customer choose and book a luxury service apartment instead of a hotel suite in a 5-star?
Okay, so this is a question, high-end. Why would you book a luxury apartment? I guess with services, we're assuming the services, concierge service, etc., versus a luxury hotel suite. It's a very good question.
I'll just
So-
answer, but I have also an Adagio
Okay.
premium brand in the Middle East, so I can add
Okay.
up, after Guus has spoken,
Guus,
I
would you
can
like to-
add it on my part.
Could you tell me why not? But because a service department, of course, you have the ranking, you have the whole panel of ranges in service departments. We are in the upper level, so the service levels are quite high in any case. So people will have a daily cleaning, so there's 24-hour reception present in the property. In I would say 99% of our properties. And we do actually have a lot of CEOs and top executives
And why
staying.
are they choosing you? So what are you doing to attract them and to invite to stay in one of those luxury apartments than a 5-star hotel?
I'm assuming the suite in the 5-star hotel, we assume doesn't have kitchen facilities, dining, so to a certain extent. I
And
mean,
it's-
a lot of suites wouldn't have a kitchen.
It is more about pricing. If
I
you
can see a CEO that cook himself for himself in the evening.
So,
Yes.
yeah,
If they bring their friends, or family over weekend.
I will give you an anecdote. When I started with Fraser, we had a JV partner, and he believed that we were going to do all kind of services like in-house dining. He thought that CEOs would be getting chefs in to cook for them in the evening, etc. And I think the one demand for that kind of service we ever had was a journalist who arrived at 10 o'clock at night and said, "Can I have an Italian chef?" And we said, "Well, no, sorry, he's gone for the day." But like you said, CEOs, they have same needs and demands as anybody else, and they don't need to have somebody to look after them. And so, I mean, we have blue chip company CEOs that are staying in our properties worldwide, and it's.
the other thing is that in a hotel, basically, if they are travelling with a family, for instance, they potentially have additional rooms, whereas in a service department that's maybe got 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms in a prime location, the family is all together, and they will travel with a maid or with an au pair, so they're potentially not always cooking for themselves. But I've also found that most CEOs that we've dealt with, all the companies that I've worked with, are actually easier to handle than some of the assignees that arrive that have just literally landed the job with that major corporate. So the CEOs do just expect a certain amount of privacy. They do expect a certain amount of space. But they're actually easier to handle, and they are looking for somewhere where it's a little bit more private, maybe where they can say no to the housekeeping, and where there is an entrance that doesn't come through a public area of a hotel. So there's a lot of reasons why CEOs do like to use a service department versus saying hello to a porter every single time they're walking in and out of the hotel, or past a restaurant and bar area.
Thanks, Joe. I think what I'd like to do, I'll take some more questions in a second. We've only got about 5 minutes, but given it's an investment conference, obviously this is all anecdotal, and you're going, well, is it, isn't it? Is it compelling? So we actually thought we'd back this up with some proper data as well, some proper numbers. So, Vedrana, can you click this next slide for me?
Just this one.
It should come up. Okay, can you see this? So this is not from us. We just didn't cobble this together and say, let's just convince the audience. This is from a WATG report in 2015. They're planning to update it this year, which will be great. It's a comprehensive study, 4-star hotel versus a 4-star apart hotel. You can see that the spread in occupancy there. Obviously, a difference in rate because you've got a longer length of stay, which obviously has an impact on the pricing. But if you look at the RevPAR, which obviously is one of the key indicators for our industry, you can see the RevPAR difference. But the other driver is obviously the rooms revenue. And if you combine, the efficiency of the rooms with outsourcing kind of ancillary services, whether it's F&B and that kind of thing, then obviously you get much greater flow through GOP. You've got it 63% versus 49%, okay, there. And then we have all the way through to a profitability per square meter, pretty helpful. You got 488 on the left-hand side, which is for the Aparthotel, and 442 on the hotel side, or per square foot. If you're from the UK or the US, it's 45 on the Aparthotel versus 41. So just some kind of hard data to kind of back that up, and just kind of throw it out there, and also just kind of open the floor to questions, given we got a few minutes left. Macy.
Okay. My question is about construction or conversion. In other words, just in general, which do you prefer, or which are you using the most? New construction, conversion?
Also new build.
Do you do conversions?
Actually, of course, new build, when it's possible, it's better because we can adapt, our standards and really improve and, optimize those figures dramatically. But, for good locations, sometimes we have to adapt. And actually, the aparthotel sector is pretty good because we have, longer, bigger, size of unit than classical hotels. So for office building, we can be pretty good in terms of optimizing the number of keys. Of course, we, too wide, when the building is too wide or too square, it's complicated, to optimize the number of square meters. But, I don't know, for Frankfurt, for example, there is an Adagio in the big tower in Frankfurt office building. We've been able to really maximize, the conversion and the number of keys we've been able to make. It's a tower, so very limited space on the ground floor. So it was a wonderful use to turn an office building into a Aparthotel when you can change the use, of course. But definitely, we can turn, existing buildings and even existing hotels in a Aparthotel quite easily.
Stephen.
Stephen?
Christabelle and Vedrana, really. What other sectors are you drawing your inspiration from in terms of design? Is it retail, boats?
That's a good question. So, where does the inspiration come from product design
Seiko.
perspective?
Seiko.
Drawing their inspiration from
So
Seiko.
Guus says Seiko. Okay.
For us, for me, it's hotel. I'm not sure I'm getting the question, but the interior design, you mean, Stephen? Yeah. It's coming from hotels. Again, there is a big trend at the moment with the lifestyle hotels. We've been discussing the way that, public areas are really getting smaller, merging the functions. So we're getting into this real lifestyle kind of interior design with high table, high chairs and all that. So that's for the public areas, and after for the apartments. I think for the long stay and this market, we need to have very high quality, FF&E in the rooms. Of course, the kitchen needs to have high quality, white goods. So definitely focus on high quality, maybe a little more classical, I would say, than the lifestyle trends that we're seeing for the apartments. And for the common areas, just follow the hotel brands.
Yeah. What we often say is because we don't spend as much money on public areas, you actually have a slightly larger budget for your FF&E. So in our rooms, we do have a little bit of marble in the bathrooms and the kitchen area. So we do like that luxury feel, but we try to stick to also quite simple, slick, design-led, but still fairly simple designs. Because at the end of the day, you can't do something that's too offensive. If someone's going to be staying there for a few months, it's not like staying in like a crazy golden room with like massive chandeliers and things like that.
I guess the angle, Stephen, you were also looking for was kind of space compression, looking outside at cabins from cruise ships, maybe trains. I mean, just kind of.
In airlines.
Yeah. Yeah.
The use of space or
Yeah. I mean, my take on this would be, as with the hotel space, we need to take more innovation from outside of the sector, because in terms of space utilization, there are other sectors doing it much more effectively than we are. And, given what you want to try and squeeze into an apartment, I would say, we've still got a lot to learn about how to do that.
Yeah, also from my perspective as a buyer of service apartments, as in putting in a huge amount of people that are using it, durability is actually really high on the agenda as well, because handling the dilapidations after a family's moved out, if you've got a very high-end product or a product that's very good for, or not a good colour, do concentrate on the fact that people will be living and eating in that environment. It's not like a hotel where they maybe come in, just use the bed, use a shower and move out. They're actually going to be spending a much longer period of their time, including the whole weekend potentially. So durability.
Even more reason to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it is, unfortunately, we are out of time. I'm really sorry, but if you have burning questions, please come up. The panelists are going to stay here. We have been told we need to stick to the timetable. What I would like to do is thank Guus, Joe, Christabelle, and Vedrana. And on behalf of myself, thank you very much for participating today. Thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you.